Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Eric Fisk. I am a professor of political science and government, and this is the last video in my series about what's going on in the world of American politics right now. I never really came up with a better title, sorry. But basically this last one I wanted to sort of wrap it all up and sort of talk about why I think the long-term implications are happening and why they're so concerning for people that study politics, and why those of us who might not quite understand why there's people freaking out right now, or why they felt like this was just another election in America, why it wasn't. And so if you haven't seen the first 4 videos, again, I've tried to sort of build up to this, and so I think it's important that take some time, go watch the first 4 videos. If you need to take a break from them, watch one a day, that's okay. I won't be offended. Maybe have a cup of coffee or a drink or something, whatever you need to get through it all. But this last video, I want to talk about this idea of a sort of political or electoral realignment that happens in a lot of countries, but definitely in the United States. And what political scientists have found is that like every 30 to 34 years or so, our country goes through this like dramatic shift in our politics. So basically the idea of what the political parties stand for, right? Their platform, their policy stances, who supports which party, who votes for which party, all that kind of stuff just like gets upended. And it's not overnight. It takes, a few years, maybe 5 or 10 years as like this transition period, so to speak. But it almost happens like clockwork, like every 30 to 34 years, like and if you go back and look at electoral politics in America, you can like see it happening. And probably one of the most recent examples that's very profound is if you go back and look at a electoral college map, right? This is how we pick a president. Look at the electoral college map in 1964 and how much blue there is. Then look at the electoral college map in 1968 and how much red there is. States that used to be very strong for Democrats all of a sudden became very strong for Republicans, and vice versa. Like almost like a 180, like pretty darn close to a 180 within like 4 years, 5 years. And obviously there were some trends kind of coming to lead up to that, but a lot of it had to do some with the Vietnam War, people that were against the Vietnam War and trying to get us out of the Vietnam War, ones that wanted to finish it. But mostly it was the Civil Rights Act, right? So the people that were against the Civil Rights Act, whether they were Northerners or Southerners, ended up shifting to the Republican Party, and those that were for the Civil Rights Act, whether they be Northerners or Southerners, shifted towards the Democratic Party. And because of the demographics of the time, it entirely changed the map on who supported the Republicans and who supported Democrats, and how each party sort of saw themselves, their party platforms. And so that realignment happens every 30 to 34 years or so, give or take. And there's a lot of reasons why this might happen. I think probably the most basic argument is that it's just generational, right? When a new generation becomes of age and it starts really voting, starts running for office, starts controlling the levers of power in government, they have different ideas about politics and government. I mean, think about your parents or your grandparents. It's a fun conversation. Do you have the same views as your parents about politics and social issues and economic issues, or your grandparents? No, maybe some, but there's a change, right? And so when the next generation starts to take over, it's not their parents' Republican Party anymore. It's not their parents' Democratic Party anymore, and they don't want it to be, so there's a shift. And I think for the last like 10 or 15 years, I think a lot of us have sort of been like, are we in one right now, right? I think some of my history professor colleagues might help me out and say that sort of like it's hard to see history while you're living through it. But I feel that now that we're on this end of the 2024 election, I'm pretty confident that I can say that we just went through or are going through a fundamental political realignment in America. And so what I think a lot of us think of as a traditional conservative or a traditional liberal, usually embodied by the Republican and Democratic Party, respectively, they don't really represent the current political system at all. Because as I've said in the last few videos, there's been such a hard lurch to the right by the Republican Party that a lot of the traditional political beliefs of Republicans and conservatives, that's not what they stand for anymore. And the people that voted for them, it's a different group now, right? There's different demographics. There's a lot of interesting demographic information coming out about who supports Democrats now and who supports Republicans, who voted for Trump, who voted for Harris. And so I think a lot of our traditional understanding of how American politics works is wrong. because we just went through a dramatic change. And so when you have that party, one party shift so far to the right, it kind of might open up a space in the middle. And so you've actually seen the Democratic Party as well try to pull. I mean, this is where the last few presidential candidates have tried to sort of appeal to disaffected Republicans or moderates or independents or however you want to structure them. And so that, I think, is the new normal. Like, this is not a blip. This is not a, one-time thing. These are the new political parties. These are the new platforms. These are the things that they're going to stand for the next 20 to 30 years. And so I don't think that this is just sort of it was just another election, whatever. This is the new normal. And again, I think it's difficult for a lot of people to see that trend happening because they only tune into politics every once in a while. And it's difficult for some too, like my students. As a professor, a lot of my students, they were like 10 years old when Trump got first elected. So obviously they don't know anything else other than Trump as the Republican Party. So for them, this is completely normal. This is just how this is American politics. This has been American politics since I've known about politics. But again, it's not. And so because of all these changes, one of the reasons why on some level I'm freaking out up here is because I think that I'm skeptical that traditional methods of resistance are going to be effective. I don't think that they're going to work as well as we had hoped, or maybe they might have in 2016 to 2020, because a lot of those guardrails that I talked about are no longer there. And also, at this point, I think we can safely say that not majority per se, but a large population of people chose this path. And so it's going to make resistance and pushing back against that much more difficult. Is there hope for the future? I could be wrong, right? I would be the first to admit that these are some big variables, and let's put it in a scientific term, very big variables going on here, and trying to connect all the dots is not easy. So I could be completely off base, and maybe I'm wrong. But maybe I'm not. And I wish that I could leave you all with something that's a little bit more upbeat. If you know me, you know that I always try to tell people that my personal motto is also my blood type, B positive, right? That's my dad joke for the day. But I think sort of false hope and insincere hope is just not helpful right now. And so I would rather it be just some sober truths. And so I guess that's sort of where I have to end things. If there's a desire for it, and I think more importantly, if I have the will for it, I might do sort of a what can we do kind of series, right? For those of us who don't want any of this, or have all of a sudden realized that this is not what we want. But in the meantime, the best I can say is to just stay informed, keep the people that you love close to you, and stay safe.